Hey, what's up, everybody? Chris Flick here, Chris Flick Podcast number 89, man. I'm sitting in my car. I've got all these thoughts going through my mind about things that are going on in present day, right? Ukraine is currently under attack. They're under siege, invasion by Russia. And as I was talking to some people this week, and it kind of came up a few times at the gym, I was going to run a Q&A episode, but instead I just kind of want to talk about a few things here that I think kind of apply together. We're going to try to tie in one of my favorite books, one of my favorite movies, and one of my favorite sports stories all into what's going on right now in the Ukraine. So, I was talking to my friend, like mentioned in a previous episode. This man fights fires. He's in New York City. He works for the fire department in New York City. He was just on the front page of the New York Post. He's doing hero's work. And as we were talking about this, as we were just talking about things in general, the conversation went to human beings taking the path of least resistance. And after hearing him out a little bit on that, and I kind of agreeing with him, but then I just thought for a sec, I was like, no, dude, you don't take that path of least resistance. You choose to go into the fire. It's while others stand back and watch, you're running into the fire, into the flames, into the blaze, right? And it takes a special kind of person to do that, a courageous type of person to do that. And as we talked about that, we started talking about things in Russia, like they didn't the Ukrainian fighters didn't capitulate, and kind of led to that story about King Leonidas in the movie 300, where the Persians come and they say, hey, this is what's going to happen. These are the amount of troops we're going to pour into the country. We're going to invade. We're going to take you over. And King Leonidas looked at the man and said, they basically were like, lay down your arms. Leonidas says, come and take them. Now, there's stories of that coming out of the Ukraine, where men and women are just holding ground. They're fighting, and it doesn't matter what the condition is. They're going to fight for what they believe in, right? That takes true courage. They're not taking the path of least resistance. They are taking the hardest path imaginable, and they're going to fight, unfortunately for some of them, to their demise. Now, sticking with that story from 300, Stephen Pressfield wrote a great book called Gates of Fire, and it's about the Battle of Thermopylae, right? It's when those 300 Spartan men went to defend what was known as the Hot Gates. Now, this was a small, narrow pass, and they decided that we're gonna line ourselves up. We're gonna get 300 of our best soldiers. Now, these soldiers also happen to be fathers to an heir, right? A male heir. So all of these men had sons. It was an all-sire unit, and basically what that message was being sent is that it was this all-sire unit had somebody to kind of pass the torch to in their child and their son. It was practically a suicide mission, all right? And these 300 men knew that, so they go to the Hot Gates, right? And they fight the Persians off. The Persians had the opportunity here where they could just keep pouring resources and resources and resources, throwing resources and men and bodies at the Spartans, and it didn't really matter. It was kind of a war of attrition. It was kind of the like if, somewhat of United States history with U.S. Grant decided that during the Civil War, in order for us to beat the South, these guys, they knew the terrain better. They were winning these smaller battles. It was just going to become a war of attrition. We were just going to send men at them, just keep sending men and keep sending men until the South kind of capitulated and had to basically surrender, right? So now we're going back to the Hot Gates. 300 Spartan warriors, right? And they had their, I forget the name for it, but they basically all had assistants. The reasons and these men also fought, the reasons that these were not counted in the 300 is because they weren't true Spartans. It's either maybe they were, a bastard son of a Spartan hero, maybe they were a slave from somewhere else. So it was basically every one of these 300 men had their little, had their aides, so to speak, right? But these aides were fully capable of battle too. Now, the Persians come in, and after day one, the Spartans fight them off, right? Morale is high. It reminds me of the stories in Tribe, written by a great man, a great author. I don't know if he's a great man. I never met him. A great writer, Sebastian Junger. Hard times bring people together. The Blitzkrieg during World War II, the Germans thought that they were going to just barrage and just hammer the United Kingdom with, just dropping bombs basically, and by destroying their environment, destroying their cities and their buildings, that it was going to destroy morale. But what it actually did was the exact opposite. It brought people together. I think that's happening in the Ukraine right now. After, devastating natural disasters, these huge storms where people are barely clinging to life, or some of these guys that were trapped in a coal mine, so to speak, like a coal mine disaster, right? Where these hard times, just the people don't have a choice, and they have to cling together, and they have to do whatever they can to survive, right? And it brings people together. Instead of destroying morale, it brought morale up. It happened to the United States here after 9/11, a devastating time in our history, right? And instead of people feeling sorry for themselves and wallowing and saying woe was me, it brought people together, and people were as patriotic as ever be, as probably they will ever be in my lifetime now, and most of our parents' lifetime, right? So where are we at here? We're at the Battle of the Hot Gates now. After day 1, the Spartans fight them off. Day 2, the Spartans fight them off. But over time here, the Persians have the resources to just keep sending. The lines get broken, right? Some of these great leaders get, some of the great fighters are getting, they're getting killed, right? Which leads to a last-ditch effort where they try to rush a Persian tent. They try to kill the king. It doesn't work. Long story short, these 300 all basically don't survive, right? And now, how does this story get told? One of the aides to one of the workers gets captured. He shares the story, yada yada yada. Right? That's where Stephen Pressfield gets his tale from with the Battle of 300. Now, what happened here? I'm hoping here is what this done. It showed that 300 men could fight a lot, right? And it's hopefully showing itself what is going on with the Ukrainian people. It's that we could stand up to the bully, so to speak, and it doesn't matter what kind of resources they have. We're still going to fight to defend things that we believe in, right? So that's one thing that we're looking for here. Hopeful that whatever's going on over there, where you stand up to this bully, hopefully standing up to the bully leads to, this Mike Tyson effect where, Vladimir Putin is trying to intimidate. Mike Tyson's his first 20-something fights, he was the scariest man on the planet, the baddest man on the planet. They were naming him. He was the youngest heavyweight champ. He was knocking everybody out. People were pretty much giving up before they got into the ring, until one fight in Japan when a 42-1 underdog by the name of Buster Douglas comes to town, right? Not comes to town. They both go to Japan. They fight at this ungodly hour. Tyson's ego allowed him to think he was going to walk in there and just knock this guy out, right? Buster Douglas had different plans. He weathered the storm. And he hurt Tyson, right? And Tyson's camp, they didn't even have the necessary equipment, the necessary anti-swelling agent, so to speak, the compression stuff. I don't even think they had an ice pack, man. I think they were putting ice in like a medical glove and then using that to put pressure on his face as it swelled up. So like we're talking about here, true underdogs, right? The 300 Spartans, Buster Douglas, these guys stood up to the bully. And in the Spartans' case, they didn't win that battle, but they ended up winning the war. In Buster Douglas's case, he ended up winning that. He ended up winning that fight, and he goes on to, be credited with one of the greatest upsets in any kind of sport, right? So, as we go here, before I move on, before I move on, sorry, if you're watching this on YouTube, I just put the hand up to kind of block everything there. Sorry. One of my other favorite lines from that book, Battle at the Gates of Fire, right? Stephen Pressfield's book was Dionysus was one of these great Spartans, and they come and meet him, and they're like, how are you going to withstand the onslaught? We have so many troops, we have so many archers, we're going to be littering the sky with bows that it's going to block out the sun. And you know what Dionysus said? Then I guess we'll fight in the shade. Those guys had no back down in them, and they did not intend on capitulating no matter what the circumstances were. They thought they were the best, and they fought like they were the best, right? So I love that he spun it that way, right? Where the enemy's out there, they're telling you how bad they're going to destroy you, and there's a story about Russia pulling up to an island, and saying, "We are a Russian warship. Please hand down your weapons," and the Ukrainian response was, "Russian warship, F you," right? How about that for some freaking fighting spirit? I don't know how this thing's going to end up. I think it's on, day 6 of the invasion, maybe day 8. I'm losing track here, but anyhow, I'm remaining hopeful that the Ukrainian fighters continue to do their things and all these other countries can continue to give aid. Now, it's crazy that a couple days ago when I was in California, well, now it's over a week ago, I was having a talk with our host who we stayed with. We were on Camp Pendleton, and he was a Marine, and we were talking about warfare, and we were like, man, where's this warfare going? Are the days gone where, two countries go toe-to-toe and just, with tanks and just start battling each other? And my opinion was like, I don't see that being a thing, because, you see what, like, the Vietnamese soldiers did against the Americans, these guerrilla tactics, and how successful it was. And even in some of these more modern day wars where, we're in Afghanistan, we're in Iraq, and, they didn't have the resources to go toe to toe, so they hit us and then they left. They knew the terrain better. Hit and runs, surprise attacks, bombings, this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if the Ukrainians have the ability to do stuff like that. I wonder if stuff like that is going on over there. I don't know if it is. But as I'm talking to this Marine, I'm telling him this. I'm like, man, I just don't see how modern wars, if there's ever going to be another World War II situation. Fast forward 5 days, and I mean, that's practically what is being rumored, right? Two big countries battling, artillery and all this other stuff. So I was totally wrong on there. I thought we would kind of get beyond some of these gruesome war situations. But, I'm thinking too, like, you have the ability to choke off a country almost electronically now, where you don't have to have these soldiers surround a city like they used to and like starve the people out, so to speak. I think that's what Russia did to the Germans, to the Nazis, and which led to the, kind of led to the end of that World War II situation where, the Nazis just got froze out, man. They got froze out of Russia. They didn't prepare for the winter. They were cold, they were hungry, and they gave in, right? I'm hoping that there's some sort of stuff that we could do here to a power like Russia when they're acting in that certain way, where you could kind of choke them out, and, whether it's internet related, whether they're trying to cut the banking, whether, all of these sports organizations and all this other stuff, they're dropping them as partners. If you start to hit this country where it matters, which unfortunately seems to be money, because money seems to be the motivating factor in a lot of this stuff, right? Money and power. If you could kind of choke them out from that, can you put an end to these conflicts without having to, sacrifice so many deaths, right? So many human beings, so much human life. I don't know. This is pure speculation, and I'm just a guy that has a gym in Pennsylvania that likes to read history and think. So just take my opinion with a grain of salt. Now, I also want to go on this with, it reminds me of one of my favorite books ever. One of my favorite movies as well, The Godfather. And we're at this point in the book here where Clemenza, I think Michael Corleone, who was like a military guy, he went to school, he wasn't going to follow the family business. It's Al Pacino's character, and Clemenza, the big heavy dude, says to him, Michael, you got to stop. This is when Michael's about to turn, right? And he's about to do a job for the family and really get involved. And there was some conflict going on. They tried to kill the old man, Vito Corleone, played by Marlon Brando. And I think this is the part of the scene where Clemenza says to him, you got to stop them at the beginning. This is talking about their opposition. You got to stop them at the beginning, like they should have stopped Hitler at Munich. And as I think about that quote from that movie, I'm thinking to myself, are we going to be in a situation like that now? It's 80 some years later? Are we in a similar situation here where we're going to be looking back and saying, they should have stopped Putin in the Ukraine, or they should have stopped him, years before, right? But instead we gave them massive amounts of money for oil. They were able to host the Olympics, World Cup, I don't know about the World Cup, but I know they definitely hosted the Olympics recently, and it's just like, why would you support? It's almost like how the Nazis held the Olympics, and I think it was 1936. Like, really, that's the country that we're going to go to for the Olympics? And you saw the Winter Olympics this year in China. It's like, why are we sending all of this money and all this revenue to these countries that have these questionable qualities, where, you hear stories out of China where there's literally a Holocaust going on there. The Uyghur Muslims are just getting annihilated, right? So, great spot, right? That's the perfect choice for the Olympics. The Olympic Committee and all these other places just kind of need to get their heads out of the rear end and start thinking about the big picture, not just what's going to benefit them the most financially. So, lastly here, ego, right? Ego's the enemy, right? Ryan Holiday, he's got a book written on that topic, and basically what we're looking at here is we're looking at the ego of a man by the name of Vladimir Putin, right? Let's just say he's a leader. He's used intimidation. He removes his opposition through uses of force. He's a tyrant. He's all of these things, right? So what are we going to do if that individual, the Mike Tyson effect, right, where Tyson gets knocked out and he lost his intimidating factor. People are like, oh, this guy can be hurt, this guy can be beat, this guy can be knocked out, right? What is going to happen to Vladimir Putin if the Ukrainians somehow pull this thing out of their rear ends and they continue to fight off Russia, and maybe they get some aid from another country and they're able to put a stop to Putin's advancements into the country? What's somebody like that going to do when he's almost made to look like a fool on the international stage? These are things that I don't want to find out. I don't want to find out what he's going to do next if the Ukrainians continue to fight them off, right? But, who knows what's really going to happen at the world stage, because I feel like even those in the know, so to speak, people that we talk to, people that I talk to anyway at the gym that follow the news and stay up to date on a lot of stuff, I still think that no matter how hard we try, we might only know about 10% of what's actually going on behind the scenes here. And hopefully we could continue to kind of, actually, you know what, I don't know. I just hope that the Ukrainians continue to get help and support and they can continue to fight off. But as of right now, probably as we speak here, the country's being bombed and people are dying and it's just total misery over there right now. So hopefully that morale could stay high. Hopefully they could keep on fighting the good fight, and hopefully some aid comes. I don't know what the right aid is. I don't know. I don't want this to become a world war, but I do hope that there's some sort of positive resolution here now. We talked about Mike Tyson. There's one more heavyweight boxing story I want to share, right? And that's the story of the Klitschko brothers, man. I think it's Vitaly. It's Vitaly and Vladimir, and I don't remember which one is the mayor of Kiev. And they're not leaving, man. That president over there, they're not leaving. They're leading by example. And we got that. This one comedian talks about the immigrant mentality, where there was a run of former Soviet Union champions. You got Vasily Lomachenko over there allegedly fighting. We got the Klitschko brothers over there fighting. Those guys, they grew up post-Soviet Union, and their childhoods were just littered with, poverty, not enough food, despair. So what happened? They started to fight, right? And, you look back in history, whether it's there was a run of Irish champs, Jewish champs, Italian American champs, those firstborn, that first generation immigrants that came over to America, the only thing that they knew was to fight, and they became champions. And I think we saw a run of that lately in the 90s with the Klitschkos, and even today, where some of these former Soviet Union countries, guys that grew up, in total despair, post Cold War, and the only thing that could get them out of there, the only thing that got them freedom, so to speak, was fighting. And now those same champions are still fighting for their lives. Now they're fighting a different kind of fight, fighting for their own lives as they try to, change their homelands, their countries for the better. So these are stories that these are the important sports stories that need to be covered, I think, right now. And so kudos to those men, right? Chris Flick Podcast. This is the first time I'm actually ever touching on a current event. I want to get some feedback on this stuff because I like the historical sense of these things. I like, if anybody's got some good examples out there, man, just please let me know. Please share them. Like the podcast. ChrisFlick.net's the website. You guys could go there. You could send me a comment there. The podcast will be posted there probably March 4th. And, man, we'll see how this thing plays out, guys. Stitcher, Apple, Google Play, YouTube, all that stuff, guys. Chris Flick Podcast. Search it, find it, like it, share it. Let me know your thoughts on this thing, man. Peace, everybody.